With that, we move on to the second part of APAC Roundtable 2. This time, the discussion would revolve around jewelry demand and scrap flows in ASEAN market, especially during COVID and post-COVID. To chair the session, it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Albert Cheng, CEO SBMA. Joining him on the session is two veterans, Mr. Ermin Siong, Advisor, Federation of Goldsmiths and Jewelers Association, Malaysia, and Mr. Lê Chi Trong. I hope I got your name rightly, sir. CEO, Vice Chairman of the Board, PNJ Vietnam. I hand over the session to Mr. Albert Cheng. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vasa. Good afternoon. I think you would agree with me that we have packed so much content into the first half of day one. Thank you for staying on, and I promise you the next half is equally interesting. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Ermin Siu, my good friend from Kuala Lumpur, advisor at the Federation of Goldsmiths and Good Jewellery Association, and director of Pokong Jewellery in Malaysia, and also Mr. Lee Chit Tong, Chief Executive Officer and Vice Chairman at Kunyong Jewellery. Okay. Both Pokong and PNJ are leading and representative jewelry group in their country. They will join me in discussion of the jewelry demand and scrap flow in ASEAN. Well, it goes without saying that the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic is unprecedented into the jewelry sector, particularly jewelry retail, which require foot traffic as well as touch and feel of the product during the sales process. The closing down of shopping mall, restriction on social gathering, and even lockdown are detrimental to the survival of the business. I've done a survey recently with some of the players in the ASEAN market, and they told us that the first half of 2020 was badly hit, but it recovered quickly in the second half, probably due to some measure have been effective. A brief sign of getting back to 2019 level. The 2021 looked promising, but was dampened recently by the hike in COVID cases, first in India, then ASEAN region again. Today we are very tight on timing, so I would like to first ask Ermin and then Mr. Tong to give us some update on the jewelry demand situation and scrap flow in their country in the past 18 months before we start our Q&A session. May I ask Mr. Ermin Siu to update us on what's happening in Malaysia recently? Ermin?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Albert. First and foremost, I must compliment SBMA for organizing this Zoom conference in such a difficult situation. Back to Malaysia, we actually started quite well at the beginning of pandemic in the early 2020. We took the pre-active step of actually imposing the first lockdown, what we call here MCO, Movement Control Order, in March 18 till May the 4th. During this time, all business is almost closed except all those very essential services. So all the jewelry stores, all the manufacturers closed shops actually. And when we reopen in May, the 5th actually, we actually expect a slowdown and maybe some panic selling from the consumers, because that is when the price of gold was actually quite high, almost the historical high of 2,000 plus USD per ounce. But surprisingly, the retail business actually not that bad. We didn't see any panic selling. And most of the retail store actually registered very good sales, some as good as 50%, and some even claim double. Of course, there are some reasons for this brisk sales. And this so-called boom in sales actually lasts until maybe November 2020. Can I have the next slide? And the reason for this brisk retail sales point out to maybe the two very good reasons. One is the government subsidies and aids. Actually, until June this year, the government has actually forked out almost 380 billion ringgit in terms of loan moratorium, cash payments, wage subsidies program, utilities discount, microcredit working capital, and relief and recovery facilities for small and medium enterprises. So there's actually quite a lot of liquidity in the market, especially the loan moratorium actually lasts for 6 months. And coupled with the drop in gold price from May 2020, about 2,000 plus to April this year, almost about 1,006, which actually encourage people to go into the gold shop and do some buying. That's where we actually enjoy quite a good sales. In fact, if you look at the two listed company in Malaysia, both Pokong and Tome, they actually announced a very good profit. We have to talk a little bit about export for Malaysia whenever more than what we consume locally. But unlike the retail sales domestically, the export actually was quite badly hit. From the figures that we get, the export actually dropped almost 70% compared to the previous 2019. In terms of tonnage, it's about 32 metric ton in 2019 to about 13.5 metric ton in 2020. This is of course due to the restriction in overseas travel. And another reason is also because of the boom in the domestic sales. A lot of these manufacturer exporters actually switched the market, to local markets. Can I have the next slide? Talking about scrap, like as I mentioned earlier, there's actually no significant sellback of scraps during this the whole of 2020. The local market for scrap is estimated to be about 15 metric ton a year. And they are actually almost consumed locally, very minimal export. And of course, the sources of scraps, we have almost 4,000 plus of retail outlets spreading throughout the whole Malaysia. And beside the retail outlets, we also have about 1,000 over Aurano pawn shops. This is the Sharia compliant pawn shops, which some are operated by banks, some are operated by some corporation. And we have another 800 plus of traditional Chinese pawn shops. These are the sources of scraps for Malaysian markets. I would like to welcome question from the floor or from Albert later on. So I will finish my presentation here. Thank you.
Thank you, Min.
Thank you, Albert.
Thank you. May I ask Mr. Tong to also give us some update on Vietnam, which I have an opportunity to look at the annual report result, and it was actually a fantastic year last year. So maybe Mr. Tong, you can tell us why you can keep the company going even during this pandemic time.
Thank you, Albert, and thank you, Armin, for sharing the information about the market in Malaysia. Vietnam market, unfortunately, is not on that direction. We have a different story to tell. Please come into the next slide. Yes, this is what newspaper. I just quote some what on the public newspaper during Q2 last year. People raised a question about whether the jewelry and gold industry coming to the sunset. They have a lot of question last year. By this time of last year, about more than thousands, I think nearly 2,000 retailers. Actually, they do not continue their certificate. Normally, they have to renew the license every year to comply with the SBV State Bank of Vietnam regulation. But last year, they did not renew. And about 100 of producers, small producers, actually, they are in kind of frozen. That's the reason why they also they did not renew their license of production last year. And that's the reason why you can see that the public raised a question whether this industry coming to the sunset day. And actually, next slide, please. If we look at the number, this is the number because the market in Vietnam, we don't have the official statistic. This is what we estimate from P&J and also from other colleagues in the industry. You can see that we're starting the year with quite a good growth, about 20%. But suddenly from February and March, when Vietnam was also going through the social distance and then lockdown during March, April, and until early May, and you see the sharp decline of the year-on-year growth, very sharp, about 60%. And then things getting better for P&J starting from May, but not for the whole industry. Actually, then we are hit by the second wave of COVID in late June, July. And that's the reason why the market only recovered by the end of the Q4 last year. And the total retail consumption, not only the gold market, is shrinking dramatically. And the jewelry market is shrinking even faster because at that time, people will worry about the financial crisis. And also some of the small and medium enterprise, they have a shortage of their liquidity. That's the reason why they use the jewelry and sell it back. And it makes the situation even worse for retailers. They have a double problem to solve. On one end, they drop in sales dramatically. On the other end, they have to prepare enough liquidity to deal with the selling back of the jewelry, of the used jewelry. And this is the picture that we see what happened last year. We starting from the first, we see some problem, and then the whole market frozen. And until Q3, we had to overcome with a lot of difficulties. And until the end of the year, then we can find the peaceful of the victory. But in order to do that, we have to change the way we operate the business. In the past, we have the mass promotion campaigns nationwide. But from last year, we see that the market is shrinking, but not all segments. There are certain segments where the market still grows. That's the reason why we're switching from mass pumping to more dynamic and more smart throw. And that's what we are doing, trying to target the customer and try to conquer them with a very customized solution.
Mr. Tong, I guess the last slide showed to us that you have to be more customized, which I think the whole of the jewelry sector is trying to do, is to try to match with this getting more sophisticated customer, and also the customer base is getting young, and they are more savvy in the digital access. So in terms of P&J, I mean, have a strategy to deal with this changing audience, and do you have a digital strategy for doing that?
Yes, we do. And actually, that's what makes us different. You can see the total market is going down, but we still grow positive. And last year, we grew more than 20% and pretty much rely on our digital transformation. During the COVID time, the whole market is shrinking, but we also find that the certain group of customers is still having the purchasing power. They do not traveling out, so they still have disposable income to spend on jewelry, to spend on diamond. During the lockdown time, the emotional bond become more important, more meaningful to family members. And that's where we're coming in. We have the collection that this is not about jewelry, it is about connection between people, between generations. And we try to approach them with our digital marketing campaigns. And that's where when we have the CDP, the customer database platform, show they're powerful in understanding which customers is on which emotional stage, and we approach them effectively. And we also can save the cost. In the past, we have 6 programs nationwide. Last year, we saved the marketing cost for about 40+%, but we can still grow 20% of the total revenue.
Yeah, so more promotion and more targeted campaign. Ermin, how about you? I mean, in terms of Malaysia, did you find the difficulty like what Mr. Tong has in Vietnam? I mean, that you have to deal with a different group of customer base. I mean, that is getting more digitalized, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, to overcome this lockdown, actually a lot of the retailers actually switch to online selling. They do live streaming, through the social media, example through Facebook, etc. And some of them actually recorded very good sales. And for us in Pokong, we also encourage our outlets to go on live streaming, and hopefully can generate more sales. But for whole of last year, actually we only encounter lockdown beside the March and May and middle of June. During the so-called semi-lockdown, the outlets are actually allowed to open. So even though the traffic in the shopping mall is not that good, but still we have some sales. So in fact, the whole of last year, I would say that in terms of sales, we are not too badly affected. But of course, there's some growth in the digital sales, I mean the online marketing, online sales. Yes. A lot of people actually, a lot of the operators, the retailers actually switch to online streaming, live streaming, through Facebook especially. And that helps actually, in fact.
Yeah, but I mean, the situation, this question is for both Mr. Tong and for Ermin, is in Singapore, we are supposed to be gradually opening up next week, but it seems that it might not be happening next week because there are more cases. And I think Malaysia, as you just mentioned, that it seems to be getting better, and then suddenly it surges again.
Yes.
And similarly in Vietnam. So I think we are all in this vicious circle of catch. I mean, it seems that it's never ending. I mean, I like to ask both of you as an owner or as a senior person of the company, are you worried about that this will never get a light in the tunnel? I mean, although, I mean, we heard that from time to time it bounce back, but then with suddenly a wave come in, then we all suffer again. I mean, are you worried? Can you sleep at night?
So far so good, because I mean, when the shops are not allowed to open, it's actually quite a burden to the management. There's no income, but we still have to bear all the rental, the salaries of the worker, etc. But now that the government is actually going full swing on this vaccination program, so we are quite optimistic that the situation will get better. Hopefully by the end of the year,
Yeah, we hope that by end of the year we are able to have 50-60% vaccinated. I think it probably will be able to. I think we can move around. Mr. Tong, how about your view? I mean, are you worried? Can you sleep at night?
Actually, last April last year, I have a few nights that I did sleep at that time. But after that, I myself also consider, okay, this is not the 1 year game. That will be at least 2 years. And we prepared the plan for that. We consider it is kind of the tennis game where we have 3 sets. The first set is where you now dealing with the COVID. The second set, you will dealing with the economic problems. And then on the third set is about the recovery of the new normal, when the market will be more consolidated and who will start faster in set number 3. And that's where we prepare on that way. We try to adapt. We invent new ways of approaching customers and also prepare for the liquidity depth so that we can deal with the reselling.
Yeah, so, that's always think positive. I mean, like P&J, I mean, Vietnam is a very, I mean, I follow Vietnam market for many years. And Vietnam is a very, very special market that it benefits a company like yourself. You are actually the leading brand there. And the second and the third is far away. And you actually is a household name in Vietnam. And I'm sure a lot of overseas competitor would like to come in and share your market. But from the P&J perspective, being a #1 and leading brand in Vietnam, do you have any plan to expand overseas, at least, I mean, in the surrounding regions? I mean,
currently, we are looking at the business for Vietnam and try to capture the potential of the growth in Vietnam. That is the high 2-digit growth, and that's where we are focused. In going out of Vietnam, we are thinking we will go with the partnering strategy rather than replicate what we have done here in Vietnam. It takes 20 years, 30 years to build up, and we don't think that is a good way to replicate that in other neighboring countries. I think we should approach it in a different way.
True. I mean, tomorrow we have Chow Tai Fook, the managing director, Mr. Ken Wong, will be also speaking. I myself follow both markets very closely, and I see that the P&J model and the Chow Tai Fook model has a lot of similarity. And I also have spoken with them in a few occasions that they also looking at China with the double-digit growth, and it's still growing. Sometimes they will ask themselves that Chow Tai Fook is so successful in China, but the growth is still there. So I will continue to develop China and forget about other markets. That's why we see Chow Tai Fook is very slow in expanding overseas. Tomorrow we will ask him what is their overseas expansion plan. But you just mentioned about your evaluation of Vietnam market is also double-digit, and you think that there is still a lot of potential, and you say better stay at home and grow the home market than going overseas. Is it something that you have in mind, or this is going overseas is too difficult? I mean, sometimes language, cultural barrier is difficult for a big name to move from one country to another country.
That's what I share with you. I don't think the way we replicate what the success formula that what we have here in Vietnam can be replicable in the other market quickly. We're also looking at the international market, but we think we should approach it in a social and digital pathway rather than traditional retail store.
I see. I think since it's a new era, new normal, I think we should think about how to approach it instead of using the traditional way. I see your point. Last question I'd like to ask both of you as well is, we just heard some very insightful presentation from a government official from Indonesia about their intention to let the market open up further. And naturally, they will be following some kind of example. And also there are a lot of business opportunity that presented in the country. I mean, Malaysia has a lot in common with Indonesia in terms of language, culture, and but Malaysia is much more open in comparison to Indonesia. Having heard about Dr. Eddie's presentation, do you think that you have something to offer to the Indonesian counterpart in Indonesia when they are developing and opening up their market further?
I think to develop the gold business in a country, I think and encourage foreigners to coming in. The barrier, the main barrier is actually the taxes, either the import duty or whatever you call it. Unlike most of the ASEAN country, in fact, Malaysia is the most open one as far as the gold and jewelry industry is concerned. We are almost like a duty-free zone. Anybody can come in with gold, with gold bullion, with jewelry, with diamond, gems, no problem. It's duty-free. So the government actually in terms of treating this industry, they are very business-friendly in that way. I think among ASEAN countries, Indonesia is the most closed one. as far as I'm aware. So I think maybe they should look at, I don't say in maybe Malaysia, but at least they can look at Singapore, which beside the GST is open, just like in Hong Kong. So with all the taxes, you know, our type of industry is very valuable. Whatever tax you impose, you will dampen the growth. That's my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, with the interaction that we have with the Indonesian government and also the stakeholder, the first thing that we have communicated with them is follow Malaysia, follow Singapore. These are the markets which are most open. And if there is anything that you can learn, go learn from your counterparty in Singapore and Malaysia. So I think you will expect some visitor from them going forward. And I think, yeah, please. And for Mr. Tong, I mean, Vietnam has come through a 20 years of development from a very restricted market to a relatively more open market. And now in some part of it is restricted again. So I think there is a lot of exchange and communication between different countries, different the market player. So I think the SBMA will play a role in connecting people and facilitating the more clear, transparent market to develop. And with that, I'd like to thank both Ermin and Mr. Tong for participating in this panel. And I shall pass this panel back to Vasa.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Like, you know, the session was indeed very interesting in that it presented two contrasting cases. One, that of Malaysia, and the one of Vietnam. Good to hear that organized players are still innovating and growing the market even in these tough times. Future at this point in time looks little dicey because of on and off the second wave, third wave, etc. So that's quite a lot of insight, and we hope things will get well very soon for all of us. I thank Mr. Ermin Sion and Mr. Lei Shi Trong for their presentation and insight into the respective markets. Special thanks to Mr. Albert Cheng, CEO SBMA, for chairing the session. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.